Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Tuesday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. We've discussed offseason options, but what do you think the Lakers should be doing? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. This one's always free and never behind a paywall. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers. We're getting near 25, who are all hanging out, asking us questions, asking each other questions, carrying on really constructive Lakers conversations, and waiting for the magic to begin happening. Do want to let everyone know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. And so we spent a lot of time, Andy, on Monday's show talking about the rumors of Zach LaVine on sale. The Bulls dropping the price considerably. Every LaVine must go this offseason. Apparently, everybody just in there, LaVine and the Bulls included, think it's time to move on, according to these reports. That said, that puts him maybe perhaps back on the Lakers' radar, or at the very least, they'll try to make him on the Lakers' radar to keep the price as high as possible. In that context, we talk about Kyle Kuzma, whose name kind of quietly appeared back on the radar again over the last week or so. And then on Monday, a report surfaces that indicates the Wizards are still asking for a bleep ton for Kyle Kuzma as well, multiple first-round picks. Now, it's very early, Andy, and we'll see what they get. But, the asking prices for these players are going to be really fascinating to watch because LaVine, on the one hand, is the better player, but has a terrible contract. And Kuz is a lesser player on a very favorable contract. What the premium teams have to pay for, or for each of those things, I have no idea.
Well, first of all, I just want to make sure we're giving credit about the Kuzma report. That's from Brett Siegel, who covers the NBA for Clutch Points. As far as the idea of that price going up for Kuzma, it speaks to what we had talked about before through the prism of Mikal Bridges and how, he is not a name. I mean, regardless of what you think in terms of who's a better player than who, whatever, in terms of name value / stuff on the resume, he's not at the level of Donovan Mitchell. He's not at the level of Brandon Ingram, of Trae Young. I would say he's not at the level of DeJounte Murray. Like, these are all guys that at the very least have made one all-star team, if not multiples. And that's often the way this stuff gets broken down. Zach LaVine as well. So, a Bridges, and you could throw in Kyle Kuzma for these conversations. Like, they're not at that same level of stature, even if you think the other guys are, overrated, whatever, overpriced, both. But because this is going to be, it feels very strongly like a seller's market, because you look at the West right now, and the only two teams that feel definitively like they are not going to be making moves for, a playoff positioning, play-in, whatever, are the Blazers and the Jazz. And even then, the Jazz are a difficult team to read because despite all the interest that is there, for Lauri Markkanen, if they ever put him on the market, it doesn't seem for the time being that they're going to be looking to trade him. And then I guess it remains to be seen how aggressively San Antonio would look to put themselves and Wemby in that playoff mix, or frankly,
they could be moving pretty quick. They've got there's no indication that they're going to be waiting a long time.
Right. But like how much they're looking to accelerate that process beyond this is what we're getting from Wemby's growth. And then, Devin Vassell taking a step forward, Sochan taking a step forward, guys like that. And then in the East, as much as it feels right now like the Celtics way on top, a couple other solid enough teams, and the rest of them wouldn't even make the play-in in the West. They're still in the East. And as long as they're in the East, there's going to be a lot of teams that feel like they can talk themselves into competitiveness. Case in point, the Bulls and the Wizards and their willingness to remain in insane limbo for the past couple seasons. You're looking at them and going like, guys, this is going nowhere.
Yeah.
Clearly. And yet they've remained on this treadmill because a 10 seed feels viable. And as long as you have that 10 seed, you can talk yourself into believing you got a shot at getting the 8, couple games worth of playoff revenue, and down the line.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, we got a note on Monday for Monday's show from K_DC talking about Bridges. He's like, the McHale thing is very unrealistic. Lakers have 2 players better than McHale, but unless LeBron and AD are offered, why would the Nets give up Bridges for a combination of something like Reeves and Rui? Nets are talent poor and desperate. If the Nets decide to rebuild instead of retool, there are other teams who can offer more or better picks than the Lakers. And I think that may be true. Like you say, it could be a seller's market. And the point that we were getting into with all that, and thanks for the comment, is what it's like you have to put people into categories of like, what would you give up the farm for? Like Donovan Mitchell, that's easy. You're not going to do better. You can nitpick a little bit. Is he a good enough defender? But Donovan Mitchell is an elite player in the NBA. And he's, in the prime of his career, healthy enough, that you can feel confident putting him, building around him a little bit with AD for the next few years after LeBron. Like I can live with a LeBron or with an Anthony Davis, Donovan Mitchell post LeBron foundation. You're not going to do better than that. Bridges, you put in that category, not because he's as good. Let me rephrase. I put him in that category, not because he's as good as that, but because he fills such a specific need. And in a category that's very difficult to find. Legitimate wing defender who is a legitimate 3-point shooter and, has shown to be could be a fairly reliable third scorer. When LeBron goes, if your other guy is Bridges, you're going to need to find a guy who's better than that to pair with Davis if you want to contend for titles. But with that group as a big 3, perfect complement for what the Lakers have now. When you start to get to Kuzma, guys like Kuzma, guys like LaVine, the question isn't just what you have to give up to, which player is better, who's better, Zach LaVine or Kyle Kuzma. We got another great comment. This one from Schmidtke Originals, who's a regular watcher of the show on the YouTube channel, and he kind of sums it up perfectly. I watched Chicago last year as well as Atlanta to check out LaVine and DeJounte. Talking about LaVine here, Zach's ability to shoot the 3 at a high volume and a good percentage, and the ability to cut back door, screen and roll. I was really high on him, and then he got hurt again, and that's basically the story every year. So if you get LaVine, what can't you get? It's LaVine plus what you have to give up and what you then can't get because of his salary versus Kuzma, maybe the lesser player, but what you keep and what you can add. So with all of these players, that's the math that the Lakers are going to be wrestling with all off season. It's not just the player, but the other stuff that either is or is not included in the transaction.
And that's really important to remember too, because we've seen a lot of people, whether on Twitter at Cam Brothers or in the comments section of the YouTube channel, bring up the idea of, okay, what if by taking on Zach LaVine and his very large contract that it feels like at this point Chicago wants to move on from, you were able to get Alex Caruso back as part of that, as a sweetener of sorts.
Hold on to that, because that's a great question. Because some people were like, let's do Caruso. Let's figure out a way to get DeRozan here. Let's just make the Lakers the Bulls. But it's a good question, but it gets into a lot of the complex factors, which we'll discuss next.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by FanDuel. It is winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and all sorts of different options just by $5 bet that pays off. So pick the most obvious no-brainer, put down $5, and then you are rolling. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.
So you, I think, echoed a lot of what fans were talking about when, on the page. It's like, okay, Zach LaVine, but what if the price, what if the gift you're given for taking on Zach LaVine is Alex Caruso? The idea, and a few people left this comment, like the Bulls should be giving up something to get people to take on that contract. And there is an argument to be made for that. I mean, LaVine's a 2-time All-Star, he's a pretty good player, but with an onerous deal, to say the least.
And an onerous injury history.
Yes. And, somebody who you worry about aging, into his 30s, perhaps faster than others might, like a Kyle Kuzma, for example.
Right, because his game, just to finish the thought, his game has been so predicated on super high athleticism. Like Zach LaVine pre-injuries was one of the most explosive guys in the league.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it sucks to see this happen with LaVine, but and
he could come back okay next year, but these things do tend to add up over time.
And I had a lot of exchanges on Twitter and some in the YouTube comment section where I've been pretty stridently, you're not going to come up with a scenario that makes me want to get into the LaVine business. And there's a part of me that feels bad about it because I don't want to seem like I'm crapping on a player in terms of certainly not who they are, but also what they can bring to the table. It's not that LaVine is a bad player, because he's not. It's I don't feel comfortable relying on him, particularly at a time when you've got LeBron and AD and all the concerns that come with both of them off an Olympic run, and then just LeBron turning 40. I don't want to have to worry about my third guy also being injured all the time. But that question, though,
it's the same reason we didn't want Bradley Beal.
Right.
You can't. This 3-star model isn't in itself broken. If Donovan Mitchell is your 3rd star, then you have 3 legitimately elite guys. You've talked about some of the complications, Andy, about building a team around LeBron, and they exist. There's no question. But when you look at the end of when it was all said and done, when you look at the output last year, LeBron is still an All-NBA performer, who you could have argued deserved to be on the second team. It still plays at an elite level. And so you have a legitimate star there. You have a second team all-star, all-NBA player, Anthony Davis, who's the only guy who also made an all-defensive team. And I believe Donovan Mitchell was all-NBA this year as well. So
I don't think he was.
He wasn't? He was all-NBA caliber, if nothing else.
I'll double check right now in real time.
I'm not sure how many games he played too. That's always part of it. But, he was real good this year for
he was not all NBA. He was all NBA last season.
Okay. How many games?
But he was an all-star. He was an all-star.
Yeah. So
played 55 games.
That's why. And so, as I mentioned, that he's durable enough. This may be the wrong year for that, but he's legitimately one of those guys. And so if you have 3 of those guys, the problem in Phoenix is that Bradley Beal is not that guy anymore, but he still takes up 40 something. He costs tens of millions of dollars. And LaVine would do that, is my concern, for the Lakers. He would be paid like you need to be at a level he's not going to play at.
Right. But swinging it back to also the idea of Caruso, and when we were talking about it earlier, you phrased it as the gift of Alex Caruso. And the problem is he's not a gift. You actually are being invoiced for Alex Caruso. Like, even if he is being treated as sweetener, because he is somebody that would help the Lakers in very obvious ways, and we've said many, many times, should have never not been on this team in the first place. But moving beyond that, he's not a gift. He will actually cost you. You have to match his salary. So then all of a sudden, between Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso, you're talking about matching $53 million worth of salary, which means, whether D'Lo opts in or out, that obviously gives you a little more optionality if D'Lo opts in. And let's put aside the complications of the new CBA and aprons.
Right. Can they, can't they sign and trade? No, let's just say they can.
Right. Because this is a lot of math to keep up with. And also, we are both still trying to wrap our head around these new rules that are complicated. But let's say, for the sake of argument, you can. Coming up with $53 million worth of matching salary is by definition going to gut your team a lot.
It's really, it's Vanderbilt, it's Vincent, it's
maybe Reeves,
Elo, and it could be Reeves for sure.
Well, and also, I think it also
you might be able to put the money together in a way that doesn't.
Right. But even
doesn't
then,
include Reeves. But then, can you do the deal?
Right. I was going to say, at some point, Chicago's going to be like, wait, why are we doing this? Like, if, say, we're taking on Rui's money, and we're taking on Vando's extension that starts next year, and we're taking on Gabe Vincent's money, and like, there starts to become a point where even if they want to get off LaVine's deal, what is in it for them? And they lose the trade asset, at the very least, of Alex Caruso in the process. So I'm guessing Reeves probably has to be included, whether D'Lo is a part of this or not. You start getting to a place where you are creating a really top-heavy team with likely limited options, probably like a taxpayer mid-level, and you don't have a biannual because that was on Taurean Prince last year. So it's like one taxpayer mid-level and a bunch of minimums, and whoever is still on this roster, but won't be that many of them, you're left with something that is maybe at its top end really good, but anything other than the top end will likely be pretty bad.
You know who loves that deal? The Pelicans, who own the Lakers pick next year. They'd be like, they do. Go for it. Like, we'll take our chances there. But like, and this is where I don't envy Rob Pelinka's job. Where I do envy Rob Pelinka's job is apparently he's very well compensated and has it in perpetuity. Like
he's never going to lose it.
Right. I mean, you can't lose the job. It's a great job in that regard. It's the American dream. Where I don't envy him, however, though, is these are really hard decisions, because, like, what if you could keep Reeves? And this is true of any of these sorts of trades. So you move it away from the specifics of this one, but to the broad. What if you could keep Reeves, but it would cost you like an extra pick? Like, you got to throw in 30, 25 and 31, or all three of them, or something, for one of these things where you can keep your players, where you get to keep players now, but it costs you all your draft capital. All of these things. The Lakers don't have many swings to take. They can take one big swing, or try to
hit a couple doubles,
their stuff in smaller bits. But those trades become a little more tricky to execute. And so in that, Pelinka's job is not an easy one. Again, aside from the fact that apparently doing it wrong has no consequence.
It's both stressful and really stress-free, right? At the same time.
Like, I don't know how does he wake up in the morning like concerned, or is he like, let's do this?
But like, this speaks to, though, why there have been increasing reports. The most recent one I recall seeing was from Jovan Buha, the Athletic friend of the show, that the Lakers may be leaning more towards increasing their depth in certain ways versus going after the third name. I believe Anthony Irwin, who we hope is going to be joining us over the course of this
Thursday,
week. Yeah, we're hoping so. But I believe Anthony's done some digging about this as well. And what you just mentioned, Brian, the idea of they only have so many avenues towards doing this, the idea of maybe divvying up your assets a little bit more across the roster towards improvement, as opposed to one big ass swing, unless that big ass swing is just obvious. Like, again, like a Donovan Mitchell, that is obvious. It might make more sense if you're going to end up spending all of your assets anyway. You need to make sure that the fit really, really makes sense and that the needs are really, really met, as opposed to we are just adding firepower and looking like we're doing something.
Well, it gets to what we were talking about for Monday's show, which is you have to be very specific and intentional about what problem we're trying to solve. And I think you need to do it internally. I think you can't do it relative to the Minnesota Timberwolves or relative to Dallas or relative, because, like, look how many times who we thought the team you were going to have to benchmark against changed over the course of the playoffs. First, it was Denver. Then it became Minnesota because they were obviously the team on the rise that was going to the fun. Now it's Dallas. And, Luka and Kyrie. It's going to be the combination that keeps going for this is the Western Conference is going to churn every year. So build the best team you can. It is going to have weaknesses against someone.
What's the best version of yourself? And
Correct.
Try to pursue that.
So the Lakers have to index to what are we trying to solve for ourselves? Where were the shortcomings that we had? Whether that is like the things that LaVine could help in terms of, a slasher, a guy who can create his own shot, because the half court offense got ugly, at times throughout the season, but certainly in the postseason. But was that personnel? Was that coaching? Was it both? To that end, Andy, assistant coaches in the news. And Austin Reeves making some comments that raise an eyebrow or two as he was promoting his appearance, I believe, in a golf tournament.
It is a golf tournament.
Yeah.
Locked on Lakers is brought to you by BetterHelp. And we all need an opportunity to get things off our chest, stuff that's bothering us, building up, big, small. Things can eat at you. And it's important to have that sounding board who is unbiased in your life or an outlet. And for example, we hope this show, Locked on Lakers, can be a quality escape from real life for our listeners, for our viewers. You love the Lakers. We love the Lakers. We find them just compelling all the time. And there can be a stress release from watching Laker games or just thinking about the offseason, all that stuff. But I don't care how much purple and gold you bleed. There are always more pressing issues in every Laker fan's life. And again, it is important to have that sounding board, that professional to speak with. And I can speak to what talking with a therapist did for me and my family during a really difficult period, how much help was provided. And if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be flexible, suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA.
So we got this one from the mailbag on the Locked On Lakers YouTube page. Jeremy Jasinski 6349 writes, "Hey Kamenetsky brothers, do you guys actually know anything about the Lakers situation, or are you just spewing BS?"
Just spewing BS.
Yeah, I mean, why do I have to choose? I feel like, a little from column A, a little from column B. I mean,
I'd go so far as to say, as long as the check clears, what difference does it make?
I agree. So we appreciate the
as long as we fooled David Locke into thinking we're smart, who cares?
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So we do appreciate questions and comments of all sorts on the page. Austin Reeves. This is one of the interesting things about the Darvin Ham situation and how it has gone down is that normally, and granted, some of this is context and timing, there hasn't been a lot of opportunity for guys to get into this and do it. But we heard it from Taurean Prince when he was on with Trevor Lane at Lakers Nation, did an interview over there. Austin Reeves, as he's getting ready to play in the American Century Championship golf tournament next, which is one that Steph Curry played in. He was asked about the season and what they need to do to get back to winning championships. Pretty long answer, but it's worth reading. It's a tough question because it's such a tough league. This comes from Daniel Starkland, by the way.
He was part of a conference call,
part of Lakers Nation, right? He
part of a conference call Reeves was on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, it's a tough question because it's such a tough league. There's so many teams that are growing, like you see OKC, Minnesota, obviously the two teams that are left, young teams that have been together for a while and learn to play in a system around one another. I feel like that's something you need in any sport you play, like consistency and basically a system, just growing with what we have. Obviously, Bron and AD is a very special duo to have, but just growing in a system around those two to basically help in whatever they need and then playing around them. But I think we're headed in the right direction, obviously, with a coaching change coming up. I don't know when they're hiring a coach, so I'm right there with y'all on that news. But hopefully we get somebody that comes to work every single day the way we do, ready to go try and win a championship. Now, enough time has passed between when Darvin was let go and now this coaching search that he might not have really been thinking about this in the context of what it says about Darvin. Maybe he was. But what I do think is interesting is you have seen, and there's none of it in here, very little, even from a guy like Prince, who was, said in that interview, very tight with Darvin. Not a lot of people coming to Ham's defense as a head coach in sort of the wake of it. Not a lot of that, we really let him down. We needed to be better. You have seen very little of it, even from a guy like Reeves, who, might normally just sort of be deferential and trying not to look controversial, if nothing else.
Well, he might have been that way before Darvin Ham implied that either he or D'Angelo Russell, or maybe both, crap the bed for 10 straight games. And then what's he supposed to do as a coach? Like
that does leave a mark.
Yeah. I mean, that's where even a guy like Austin Reeves, that has felt like something of a soldier at the very least, he's certainly not a flamethrower. That might be when he becomes willing to do the verbal equivalent of double middle fingers. But no matter how you take Reeves's comment, it speaks to the importance of finally landing on a coach. And thus far, it still seems to be signs pointing towards JJ Redick. And
it's just a flawless Photoshop.
Really,
he really got his neck right. His head is in exactly the right spot.
Look,
Andy, if you're just listening, Andy photoshopped JJ Redick's head on top of Thanos, similar to how we had done Cam Reddish earlier in the year. And you really, again, it's just flawless.
Look, everybody has their niche, and this is mine. But it speaks to, though, the importance of landing this hire. Again, presumably for the time being, it feels like JJ Redick. And, if nothing else, it's also starting to feel like JJ Redick, because we're starting to hear reports of the options that were out there for the Lakers. Micah Nori, James Borrego, Chris Quinn, that either have been interviewed by the Lakers, expected to be interviewed by the Lakers, whatever. They're now all getting permission to speak with the Cavaliers about that job. And then, you're starting to lose potential possibilities. So the lack of hurry from the Lakers does start to feel more and more like it is implicitly understood that it's going to be Redick. And if it is going to be Redick, it becomes that much more important that they put this guy with quite literally no coaching experience whatsoever in the best position to succeed. And that gets to Dan Wojcicki of the LA Times is on a radio show. For the life of me, I can't remember which one, but talking about
Rogan and Rodney on AM 570 in LA.
Okay, there you go. He talked about some of the names he's heard about as assistant coach possibilities. One of them was Scott Brooks, who, if the Lakers could grab him, I would jump on that in a heartbeat. He's coached a team to the finals. He is above 500 in both the regular season and the playoffs for his career. He's got tons of experience as a head coach. I don't mean this as taking a shot at
a great relationship with Westbrook if they ever bring him back.
Well, again, that's the cheap shot I didn't mean. But what I was going to say with Russ, and I don't mean this as a cheap shot, but even Russ's biggest defenders will say he's not the easiest guy in the world to coach. And Scott Brooks and Russell Westbrook had a terrific relationship. And if Scott Brooks can develop that type of long-term relationship in two spots, the Thunder and the Wizards with Russ, then that he's just good with players, period. But another name that came up was Rajon Rondo. And there are some off-the-court legal stuff with Rondo that has to be investigated internally by the Lakers, figure out how much that is a problem for them. But removing that piece of it, Rondo, the connection is obvious and the interest is obvious. Incredible basketball mind. He's got the relationship with the Lakers. He has the relationship with LeBron and AD. The respect would be there. He's one of those guys that feels like a coach in the making, but he doesn't really have experience. And you starts getting into that question of just how much inexperience can you put around a guy that doesn't have much experience or really any experience himself?
Yeah.
Because Jared Dudley, for example, his name has come up too on the bench in Dallas. He's had a couple years of assistant coaching, but not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Like if you bring in both of them, are you starting to flirt with too little experience?
I don't think you can put together a staff for Redick that doesn't include some one or two either longtime assistants or former head coaches. That said, I don't think like you look at like Brooks or Rondo and be like one or the other. Like these are like you're filling in roles.
Yeah.
And what the thing about Redick, of course, is like I don't know what his strengths are. Like we assume that his weaknesses are the sort of administrative relationship, sort of the stuff that Phil was really good at, which is reading the pulse of the team, figuring out like the little stuff. Do we practice here? Do we not? Do I push here? Do I not? Which buttons am I pressing? Which things am I doing? Like reading the having the experience to read the entire field, and not being so like you would think that Redick would be weaker there than he would be in other places. He might not need an offensive coordinator in the same way that a different coach might. Maybe he needs somebody who can help with schemes and whatever, but like doesn't need that in game, whatever. Maybe he needs more help on defense, but he might need all of these things. I was
going to say, I would assume he needs help with all of it. And that's the way I would approach it.
Maybe, but like, I'm not in the interviews. And so like when Reeves talks about being able to have a system and like Redick could arrive with a system that he believes in, wants to instill, with an understanding of how to do it and all that other things. So he might need less help with system. You understand? I mean, that's what they have to figure out with Redick is what holes are we filling in? And then with these assistant coaches is how do these guys fill the holes that Redick doesn't have? And then most importantly, will they pay them? Like you're going to have to pay people a lot to do this. And because the Lakers have that reputation of churning coaches around. You're interviewing guys who are already in good situations and have no real incentive to leave. Guys like Rondo, maybe you can kind of catch assistant coaching lightning in a bottle, but you don't know what that is either. Well, so you got to figure out what everybody's bringing to the table and put this together. Again, Rob Pelinka's job's not easy. Again, other than he doesn't get fired.
Okay, it's funny, actually, a couple things. First of all, I want to clarify a little bit what I meant when I said I would assume he needs it all, because you mentioned like you're not in the interviews, you don't know what he's saying. Agreed. I would assume that he needs all the help in all those areas anyway, because you have nothing other than Redick's words to judge this on.
Sure, but you're not going to be able to assemble a staff with the premier offensive coordinator, the premier defensive coordinator.
Sure,
like all
but
that
I would make the goal when I go about trying to, assist Redick in landing on a good staff. I would probably err on, as much heat as the Lakers took in the moment for like demanding that Frank Vogel put Jason Kidd on his staff, in part because it felt like trying to find a way to sneak Jason Kidd towards the eventual head coaching spot. He also put Lionel Hollins. They also put Lionel Hollins on that staff. Like, in retrospect, he had a very, very good, and Vogel didn't even necessarily need it as much, but he had it. I would assume Redick needs it all and approach it that way just because I want to be ready just in case unexpected things happen. Like I would be very proactive in those assumptions. And then as far as the idea of, paying everyone else, prying them away or whatever, you are correct. They're going to have to find ways to make this look incredibly appealing to, say, a Micah Nori, or who's in a good situation, or a James Borrego.
Those guys are not coming here to be JJ Redick's assistant.
Okay, well,
Borrego maybe, but not Nori, not Adelman. Those guys are not leaving where they are to become JJ Redick.
Whoever, like,
I don't think he would do it either.
Well, they need to find ways to make it as appealing as possible,
and then that is often done through money. I will say to your previous point, one of the most important answers or questions to ask Redick is, where do you think you need help?
Sure.
And if he doesn't have a good answer for that question, here's where I think my scheme shortcomings, this is where I think I need help. Find me somebody who can help me with this. If he's got a good answer to that, that actually makes me feel more confident in who they're bringing in to be presumably the next head coach. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 24,000 subscribers. Leave us questions, leave us comments. As you can see from today, we read them and we use them. We'll see everyone tomorrow.